Today I'm taking you into the kitchen so I can share with you some of my favorite meal prepping tools. I love super practical videos like this one where I can show you what I use, how I use these things, because I think these tools make meal prepping easier and they're just so useful in the kitchen. We can't talk about meal prep tools without talking about storage containers, and these are some of my favorites. So I really like these, and I have them in a variety of different sizes. I have a few that are even larger than this one, and then I have a couple that are smaller than this. So I use these the most when I'm prepping ingredients, and I also really like them for leftovers. So they are really easy to use. Just like that, take off the lid, and then of course you're gonna store your chopped or sliced vegetables, fruits in here, yogurt. If you're marinating meat, you can put them in this large one. I have an even larger one that I really like to use for when I'm marinating meat or something like that. I use these constantly. They're the ones I like the most. They're not too hard to open. They close very easily. A lot of the other brands that I've tried, these lids break a lot. When you're trying to put the lid on them, they don't coincide together very well, and then a lot of times they don't close very tightly, and these things break. So these have lasted me for a long time and they work really well. I also really like that they're glass on the bottom, so you don't get any food stains, and it's just a little bit healthier too. These other storage containers, I really like them. They work really well. They are plastic, but sometimes you do want to have plastic. Like if you're packing your kids' lunch, you don't want to have like a really heavy glass storage container that could break or is just heavy for little kids to carry. So I bought these and smaller versions of this for that purpose. And what I don't like about these is that they're so hard to open. They're really airtight, which is great. But then when you're trying to take the lid off, like I'm trying really hard and you can't barely open it. And even my husband has a hard time opening it. Whoa. Do you see what I mean? I've been close to breaking a nail opening these up. I know that they're so hard to open, so I'm really careful not to get my nails anywhere near the lid when I'm trying to pry it open. Another thing about this when you're trying to open it this hard is that if you have something in there, a lot of times the food can come out. And if you have a tomato sauce or something in there, it can spill. And then when your kids are trying to open it, then first of all, it's practically impossible for a little kid to open these. Some of them open easier than others, but almost all of the ones that I have are really hard to open. And when you're trying to open it, then the blueberries or the pretzels or whatever you have stored in there could fly right out because you need so much pressure and strength to try to open these. So I do like these, but I wish they weren't so hard to open. Mason jars are another storage container I use so much. I have them and I use them in my pantry. I store things in my refrigerator, and you can use them to store your meal prep ingredients and to make different meals in them, like a salad in a jar. So you can put all your ingredients in there and then dump it out and you have your salad ready to go. I just have so many uses for these. And you can buy them and you'll use them for years and years. I use them to make lots of different canning recipes like pickles, tomatoes, lots of different marinated things, and they are awesome for that. But then you can reuse them and use them to store things in. And even your meal prep ingredients. You can chop up some onions and carrots and celery for soup, put it in here and store it in your refrigerator. Like I said, they are so useful and they're very compact. You'd be surprised how much you can fit into these jars. So I have them in lots of different sizes. This one, a bigger size than that, the 4 cup, the 8 cup, the 2 cup, and even like the smaller ones for jams. And then I use those for salad dressings to shake them up, and then you store them right in the refrigerator, and it just saves you on so many dishes, and it's just awesome. I love mason jars, and all you need to do is buy new lids every once in a while. You can use these kind of lids for your mason jars, And this is what I use to can things, and then also just as a lid. But then you can buy these additional lids, like these plastic ones. And this kind of a lid is a ventable lid, so it opens up a little bit at the top. And this is great to keep your sourdough starter or for kombucha. I know this is like a very specialized thing, but mason jars are very universal, so there's already lots of products that are designed to use with them. This is a product that you invest some money in and then you get so much use out of it. When I'm freezing things like broth or tomato sauce, I like to use these containers. So I use mostly glass containers when I'm meal prepping or putting things into my refrigerator. But when I freeze it, then I like to use these containers. They have this twistable top, and the lid is very secure. So if it is knocked over in your freezer, or even, before you get it in the freezer, if you use it in the refrigerator, if it's knocked over, things don't spill out of it. And it's not going to pop off when you freeze something and it expands. This is going to stay nice and tight. So I really like these. The reason that I started using these in the first place is because I was using these mason jars to freeze my broth, and I had a terrible experience where one of the jars busted, even though I left plenty of space at the top for expansion. So it was such a mess. It was such a pain to clean up, glass everywhere. And then the liquid started to melt, and it was just like sticky chicken broth all over my freezer. So after that, I'm like, it's just not worth it. I'm just gonna use these. And I don't use them to reheat food or anything. So I'm okay with storing some of my food in plastic containers, and these are very versatile as well. I also have these storage containers in 2 different sizes, the 4-cup and the 2-cup, and I really like them for storing tomato sauce and barbecue sauce. I also use it for other things like storing nuts. I'll put the nuts in here, put it in my freezer, and I can store it that way. Or chicken fritter batter. That's something I like to have on hand in my freezer. So when I'm making chicken fritters, I make a big batch and I freeze part of it. And that way I have a really convenient meal ready. All I have to do is take it out, thaw it, and I have chicken fritter batter ready to be cooked up. Anyway, lots of uses for this storage container as well. The food processor is one of my favorite kitchen appliances of all time, and especially for meal prep. When I'm doing a lot of meal prep, this tool is one of my best friends. You can do so many things. It has different attachments that you can grate things. So you can grate a bunch of cheese, you can grate zucchini, you can make lots of shaved Brussels sprouts, carrots, chop up things like pesto, salsas, and all of that can be done in the food processor, and it makes your work for meal prepping so much faster, and you can use it for multiple things. Sometimes when I do a lot of meal prepping, it is astonishing how much work this thing can do and how much faster it makes all the meal prepping go. I have an entire video and blog post dedicated to all of the things I do in the food processor, so I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but I'm telling you, if you're gonna do a lot of meal prepping, I definitely recommend having a food processor because it is such a useful tool. Another small kitchen appliance that I really like for meal prepping is this Immersion blender, and it also comes with this whisk attachment. Now, a blender would be awesome to have for meal prepping too. However, a blender, especially a good one, is very expensive. And I find that you can do the majority of what you need to do with a blender for meal prepping with an Immersion blender, which is a fraction of the cost, and it does so many things really well for meal prepping. This thing is so easy to clean, it doesn't take up a lot of space, and I just love it. You can put this right into a pot if you want to make some kind of a cream soup, like creamy tomato soup, broccoli cheddar soup, and you can go all out and make it very smooth, or leave it a little bit chunky, however you like it. And it saves you the work and the dishes of having to scoop out the soup, put it into the blender, blend it in batches. You can just go at it. And I love this thing when I'm making tomato sauce or even applesauce. I use this thing only for applesauce. Like I said, I don't have to deal with pouring the apples into the blender, blending it up, finding somewhere else to pour it into, then doing the rest of the applesauce, you know. So this makes it so convenient. It's so easy to clean. Just take this thing off, wash it. It's very, very cool. And another thing that it has is this whisk attachment. So I can put this on here and I can whip up some whipped cream really quickly. I can foam up some milk. I can make a quick batch of crepes or a Dutch baby pancake and whisk it all up together. And it's so quick and easy. And I just really like this. It's very convenient. It's such a small tool, but I find myself using it over and over again. This large rimmed baking sheet is also one of my favorites. So most baking sheets are this size. So you can see the difference right here. This is a much bigger and it fits into a regular sized oven. So my oven is just a regular, normal, conventional size. It's not some kind of industrial size. So this will fit into it. It's really nice to have the extra surface space because obviously you can roast more things, but it also gives you more caramelization. When everything is bunched up onto the small pan, you don't get as much heat and everything tends to steam more than roast. So this is amazing for roasting things when you're doing roasted vegetables or you're roasting chicken and all kinds of things. You get so much more heat right onto your food. For meal prepping, it's just so convenient to have that extra space because I just love when I can make a big batch of meatballs, bake them in the oven, and I can get it done so much faster than if I was using the smaller baking sheets. You can also cook sheet pan dinners on here, which are one of my favorites. You can cook your whole meal on this one sheet pan. So I just love those recipes. They're amazing. And not only that, but you can cook 2 whole chickens on here. So you don't even have to have a roasting pan because you can use this and you can roast 2 whole chickens and use that for meal prep. You can eat that for dinner and then use the other chicken to make lots of other meals throughout the week. It's just something that I use over and over again. Not only do I use the rim baking sheets for cooking in the oven, but I also use them to freeze things. If you're going to do a lot of freezer cooking, these are a must-have. Once again, the larger size is nice because you can fit so much more on there. And this size actually fits in my freezer. My freezer is a little bit wider because I have the French door refrigerator with the freezer underneath. So it fits perfectly and there's even room left over. When freezing things for cooking, there's lots of things that you need to freeze individually, not bunch it all up in the bag because it's gonna freeze solid and then you're gonna have to thaw the whole thing to be able to use it. When you freeze something individually, you can take out just the amount that you need and you can leave the rest behind, and it's just so convenient. So I do this for pilmeni, which are meat-filled dumplings, kind of like a ravioli or tortellini. You would do that for ravioli and tortellini as well. And then what else do I do this for? Meatballs. I freeze lots of different meatballs. If you have a side-by-side freezer, then this large baking sheet is not gonna fit in there. So you're gonna have to use either a smaller baking sheet or a cutting board or something. But here's how you need to freeze things. So you put a parchment paper right on the bottom, and then you place your meatballs, your pilmeni, ravioli, tortellini, vareniki, anything like that. You put it in a single layer, so not on top of each other, but right next to each other. Then you put it in your freezer and you wait until it gets frozen. Then you take all of those frozen individual pieces and put them into a freezer Ziploc bag or an airtight container. And then you can put it in your freezer, and next time you want to make those things, you can take out as many as you want. They're not frozen together solid in one chunk, so it's very convenient, especially for things like meatballs and pilmeni when you don't want to thaw the entire thing. Besides, if you do it for pilmeni or anything with dough, vareniki, ravioli, The dough is going to fuse together when it's frozen, and then they're gonna rip apart, and definitely not what you want. So that is how I do that. Another thing you can freeze using these baking sheets are berries, fruits, and vegetables. So also you put your strawberries all in one single row, right next to each other, not on top of each other. Then when they're frozen, you transfer them to a bag. And then you can use it for smoothies and sauces and things like that, and you don't have to thaw the entire bag. That's how they do it in the stores when they freeze your fruit and your chicken wings and whatever. They are individually frozen, so that way they're not all fused together in the freezer. I could sing the praises of these rimmed baking sheets all day long. I just think they're so useful. Another thing that I use a lot for meal prepping are different sizes of storage bags. So I have the gallon sized ones, and I always get the freezer ones because they are thicker and they're gonna protect your food much better when you freeze things in there. And then I also really like the quart size. Now you can use these, or you can get these reusable ones. These are the gallon size, and you can use these in the same way that you would use these. Once again, there's just so many different ways that I use these storage bags for. If you watch my videos, I'm sure you've seen them many, many times. So I store a lot of my meal prep things in there, the things that I freeze, and then also in the refrigerator as well. I really like using them to store lettuce or herbs. You can, like I said, use this one or the reusable ones. And it's just so great. They're flexible. You can fold them. You can fit them into the refrigerator or the freezer really well. Sometimes food just fits better into a bag rather than a container. So I like to have both options for meal prepping. And another thing is that I reuse these bags all the time too. So obviously these are meant to be reusable, but I make these reusable too. So that way I can get more use out of it and have less waste. If I'm just storing herbs or lettuce, I can easily reuse it. The next week, the bag is still practically clean. Also, if I'm storing bread or other things that are just not as messy, then I can reuse them multiple times. The only time I don't reuse them is if I'm storing like marinated chicken in here. Obviously, I would throw that away. Speaking of marinated chicken, I love these bags for marinating all kinds of meat. It's just so nice to have in your freezer. But we'll get into that in another video where we're gonna talk more about freezer meals, and I cannot wait to share some of those recipes with you. For years and years, I just used those freezer bags to freeze all of the food that I was prepping. But recently, my husband got me this vacuum sealer, and I think it's worth talking about. If you're gonna do a lot of freezer meal prepping, this is awesome. This thing is gonna keep your food fresh for a lot longer. So it might be worth getting if you're going to do something like that. You can also vacuum seal lots of fresh foods to make them stay fresh longer, like deli and cheese. If you get a big block of cheese, you can cut off the small portion that you're gonna use right away and store the rest of it in a vacuum seal container, and it's going to keep it fresh for a lot longer. And then lots of things like that. You can vacuum seal it, it gets all that air out, and it'll keep it fresh longer. As I already mentioned, this is amazing for freezing things. If I know that we're gonna use the frozen food pretty quickly within the next few months, then I just store it in one of the freezer bags and I use it up and it's fine. But this is going to protect it even more from freezer burn because it sucks all of the extra air out and it keeps your food fresh for much, much longer. Of course, there are other tools that are very obvious and basic, like a good knife, some vegetable peelers, a good cutting board, but I think that just goes without saying. And you'll see a lot more tools when I'm actually meal prepping and doing things in the kitchen. So if you have any questions about any of the other tools, you can feel free to ask me anytime. I'm always happy to share. So those are some of the things that I use the most often when I'm meal prepping. And I love that the majority of all of these things are so multi-purpose and just very versatile for lots of different things in the kitchen. If it's taking up space in my kitchen and I'm paying money to buy it, I want all of these things to earn their keep and be valuable to me.